zero target of 2040 and an 80% reduction by 2032 is no longer a surprise, I would hope. And since we set the targets, we developed a strategic action plan to help us meet this target in the decarbonisation of our estates. So those of you who sit across estates and facilities would have seen the delivery plan. Within the delivery plan, it highlights how estates and facilities should lead the way to net zero, what needs to be done and by when, what action needs to be taken, as well as reporting and accountabilities that we need to support this. What we've also done is to focus on what we consider to be the pillars of estate decarbonisation as well. So this includes thinking about the reduction of our energy demand and preparing for low carbon heating and the role that electrification will play in supporting that low carbon heat and the associated increased electricity demand. Hence the need to improve our energy resilience through a mix of on-site and off-site generation, and thinking about the role our energy supply chain has to play in helping us with that transition. So this is an all-encompassing view, and some aspects of this are more developed than others. However, we're continuing to ensure that there is progress against the actions and identify what levers and support is necessary for this delivery plan and the aforementioned pillars of decarbonisation. Now, one of such activities is the decarbonisation of our heat, which is why we're all here today. Next slide, please. Great. So what problem are we trying to solve? It is the problem of heat decarbonisation because it is the biggest source of NHS building carbon emissions. And we need to understand how we transition away from gas to meet our goals. And there are a few reasons why it's hard to decarbonise heat. The main ones being the size of the challenge, the associated costs, the energy efficiency of our existing stock, especially where we've got hard to treat buildings, and switching away from something that is perceived to be perceived to be less reliable and more expensive than existing technologies. So to address this, the NHS, as part of the delivery plan I showed earlier, has set a requirement for heat decarbonisation plans. And this is important because whilst technology is key and is important, it's not enough. The heat decarbonisation plans help both in the long and the short-term strategic and capital planning for heat decarbonisation, as well as helping us to identify the set of enabling activities that we need. So next slide, please. Great, and if you click through, please. Great. So Salix, well, some of you may have already seen this. What Salix did as part of the Low Carbon Skills Fund was highlight the benefits of a heat decarbonisation plan and detailed designed as well. So it really, just like I mentioned, helps to think about that strategic journey to net zero. For those of you whose end of heating systems are nearing the end of life, or those of you that still, still have anything up to 10 years left in the life of your existing heating systems, is thinking about that journey to decarbonizing those existing systems. Beyond that, with the public sector decarbonisation schemes grants, it plays a role in helping you to apply for funding and increasing your chances of getting that funding. But it also highlights the role that this plan plays towards the whole public sector reaching the net zero goal by 2050. As mentioned earlier, the NHS target is to 2040. So we do see those heat decarbonisation plans as playing a role in supporting not just local and national planning, but we intend to see the NHS heat decarbonisation plans supporting not just the staged approach at the trust level, but also supporting strategic planning. An example is the work that Greater Manchester has done in developing their local area energy master plan for each of its districts. So what they've done was to engage locally on options to decarbonise, partly what we're doing today. So this has helped them identify and address those issues affecting local energy markets, both across their supply chain, and allowing organizations to share energy and avoid and indeed reduce grid costs. So we see this playing a role in influencing funding instruments as part of the implementation of the heat and building strategy. And in the NHS Central team, it would play a role in understanding progress towards delivery of the net zero target, where strong advocacy and support is required, and where and how delivery vehicles can be supported. And I think lastly, they have a huge role to play in signaling technology developments and the markets in terms of innovation, and some of which we're beginning to see, e.g. the development of high temperature heat pumps as well. So all of this will support the aforementioned reasons why I said it's hard, we find it hard to decarbonize heat. Next slide, please. You just click through. If you click through one more time. Thank you. So in closing, from me at least, this is a graph from the Heat and Building, graphic from the Heat and Building Strategy published in 2021, and its vision for the net zero building for the future. This view mirrors the first slide where I introduced what we consider to be the pillars of estate decarbonization. It recognizes low carbon heat as a key component of a net zero building, and highlights key technologies which I've kind of highlighted there in the circle that would most likely play a role. Now, given that the NHS stock is diverse, the path to net zero will require that mix of technologies. We know that some technologies such as heat pumps and heat networks already play a role, and we know which type of buildings these technologies are most effective in. But over the next few years, like I mentioned, a diverse mix of technologies will be required to support the existing ones, some of which we will discuss today. So I hope that by the end of this webinar and workshop series, including the AHIM events, trusts have a greater understanding of their own decarbonization technologies, be it a single source or a mix of technologies that they would require, and indeed the program for their sites. So that's pretty much everything for me in introducing this, and without much ado, I will hand over to the next speaker, which is Dr. Corinna from British Geological Survey, to talk us through an overview of the geothermal opportunities for the NHS. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. Yes, my name is Corinna Abesser. I'm the Policy Director at the British Geological Survey, and I'm speaking here in because previously I was the head of geothermal energy, and I'll share my screen. If I can do this quickly. Right. So hopefully you see a presentation now. Right. Yeah. So I'm just moving a window around so I can see. Is that okay? Mary, can you see the presentation? Good. Yeah. Right. Thank you. So BGS is undertaking we had a British Geological Survey of the UK, and we have hold a lot of data on the subsurface, including on geothermal prospects across the UK. So we have quite a good understanding of what the resources are, and we have undertaken an assessment of where resources overlap with opportunities for the NHS in terms of the 209 sites that Mary mentioned. That have been identified as the high demand heat users, and therefore the potential site for decarbonisation. Before I start, just a few definitions as to. I can't move my slides. So what geothermal energy is? So principally, when we talk of geothermal energy, it's pretty much all energy stored in the form of heat beneath the surface of the Earth. A lot of it comes from the natural decay of radioactive elements within the crust. There's some other sources, but effectively it's the water within the subsurface that kind of recirculates the heat and the rocks that store it. The geothermal energy can be exploited by a range of at a range of depths and a range of different systems. And on the right hand side here, you see the technologies that can be used or that are relevant for the UK, starting with the ground source heat pumps on the far left, which abstract heat at quite shallow depths, then the mine energy sources, and then gradually going towards the deeper technologies like hydrothermal systems from repurposed oil and gas wells or heat in granites. The assessment we undertook specifically looked at the sources over to the right, and the reason is that the deeper sources give a higher yield of heat, so you can use it for larger heat demand customers such as hospitals. ground source heat pumps are feasible, and there's other studies looking at this, but in our assessment we really looked at where we find overlap between hot sedimentary aquifers and radiothermal granites, because they are the potential targets for what we call sort of higher use, sort of deep geothermal production. Sorry, okay, so we've looked at, there's different, I've already mentioned, there's sort of different deep geothermal plays, as we call them, and effectively it's sort of deep basins that have formed geologically over time and that have filled with sediment, and in those basins we have deep aquifers where hot water circulates at depths. And on my map on the right here, they're sort of shown in yellow, blue and green. There's other targets which are sort of the hot granites, where heat is produced within the rocks, and they're quite near the surface, so we don't have to drill as deep as we normally would to get high temperatures. These are the areas we've looked at for as potential targets for geothermal developments. And on the right here, and I appreciate it might be a bit hard to see, is where hospitals overlap with those geothermal targets. So from these 209 hospitals that were mentioned earlier, we found 109 sites plot on top of a sedimentary basins which potentially holds a deep geothermal aquifer. We also found 3 sites are located on top of radiogenic granite. So effectively, there's 112 sites where you could have a geothermal source beneath a hospital. Now, within the basins, the opportunities vary. So as you might appreciate that the deeper part of the dead basins might hold more energy. And we've done an assessment of that, which is available, and we can sort of help with identifying where suitable locations are within basins. I don't have time to present this here, but the other thing we've looked at is, we've sorted the hospitals by heat demand, by potential CO2 savings, and also looking at the geology to understand what depths one might have to drill to get to the source. On the right-hand side here, you just see the larger blobs represent hospitals with high heat demand. So again, just confirming that some of the really highest heat demand sites or heat demand hospitals are actually overlying a potential geothermal target. Looking at the CO2 savings, I think we found that for the individual hospitals, savings of 1.3 to 22.7 kilotons carbon dioxide equivalent per year is possible. If only the 30 top ranking hospitals sorted by, according to their heat demand are being developed, the NHS could save 12% of their heating emissions, which is quite, I thought quite a large number. And I'm missing a slide here, but I think effectively what we found also in terms of the depths you have to drill to, it ranges between 1.2 kilometers and 3 kilometers, and that will vary will depend on where the hospitals are located in relation to the shape of a basin. All of that information we have as BGS, and we can help with sort of more detailed feasibility assessments. I assume you might not be too familiar with how a geothermal project is developed, and here is just a list of the stages that one has to go to get to a geothermal heating scheme. And just to highlight that we have developed like a flow chart and very detailed descriptions of these stages as part of a deep geothermal white paper, which will be launched on Monday, 17th of July. So there's no time to go through this here, but there will be a document made available on Monday where that can be, where details are available. And if anyone is interested in attending the launch event, which is online, either drop me a line or I can liaise with Clive to perhaps circulate the link. And that's all from me. Thank you very much. And now, yeah.
Okay, Stephen.
So hello, my name's Stephen Lowndes. I'm the technical director with the CEF. I've been involved in the development of many of the CEF's NHS schemes for the last 12 years, from inception into operational cycle. So why are we showing you a map here? So as we are seeing, access to several decarbonisation options is to a greater or lesser degree dependent on whereabouts you are in the country. It's important to explore options available, and so a starting point is to map out the top 200 or so highest energy using hospital sites. So these are sites with heat demands greater than 10 megawatt hours, as I think we've mentioned. And if we do this, we start to build a picture of what sites are most likely to have the ability to consider opportunities, like geothermal heat, for example, but also access to the initial hydrogen rollout and also district energy schemes, as well as other opportunities. We'll put the next slide up. So, as mentioned by Mary, most of us are aware of the NHS targeting to achieve the net zero position by 2040 for the NHS, but more precisely to achieve nearly a 50% reduction in emissions based on a 2020 baseline by 2032, and that's shown as point A on this graph, and then a 73% reduction on a carbon footprint plus by 2038, and that's point B. And I guess I think we all realise this is a huge challenge, both from a practical and a financial perspective. But the graph shows the impact of doing nothing and hoping that grid electricity decarbonisation will get there on its own. Based on recent electricity grid decarbonisation trajectories, at best we might see our emissions drop to around about 70% if we do absolutely nothing. But anyway, the major part of the problem is heat, as we've heard from Mary's earlier slides, and there's obviously therefore a need to concentrate on decarbonising that. Go to the next slide. So we know we have to do something about heat, as grid electricity decarbonisation is largely out of our hands, and in many cases not all of our sites can convert totally to electric heating anyway. So our map looks at the potential access that each of these 209 sites has to some of the key heat decarbonisation technology options. And what you see in the map on the left is showing the key hydrogen hub locations. Those are the green dots. And I think Cadent are going to discuss that in more detail shortly. You can see hospital clusters, those are the blue dots, around the prospective hubs, and the ability to connect these is going to depend upon the initial rollout of routes for the first phases of hydrogen mains. Go to the next slide. So on this slide, the map on the left is showing the sites sitting near the deep geothermal heat zones, and that's similar to the map shown by Corinna just now. And we've started to hear what this opportunity might mean for sites located in these regions. Now, some of the sites, particularly those in the northwest, are lucky enough to be sitting on hydrogen hub regions and geothermal zones. And the map on the left-hand, on the right-hand side, is showing quite a large contingent, which may have less near-term access to hydrogen and don't necessarily sit in significant deep geothermal heat resource. That's the next slide. This time, the map on the left is showing the intensity of district heat schemes developed and planned in the different regions of England. And the dark red zone, that corresponds to the highest density of schemes. So this sort of coincides with the area shown on the previous slide that was outside of most likely initial hydrogen hub development and access to deep geothermal. It also shows key pilot cities that they've been targeted to develop major district heat schemes. And obviously hospitals are seen as significant heat anchors to ensure their viability. And then the heat map on the right-hand side shows the sites with significant undeveloped vacant land greater than 1 hectare in area. So these sites, these might be significant when considering major solar PV farm space or other renewables that could either serve the site itself or have power generation sleeved to the grid for NHS sites elsewhere. Because we've got to remember that for many, the electric heat pumps may be the only viable heat decarbonisation option. So the ability for the NHS to develop on-site generation at scale, where practical, that reduces the operational cost risk for electric heating into the future. So final slide. So my last slide is showing the results of a model that has strategically applied different heat decarbonisation opportunities for each of the 209 sites. It's modelled based upon the site's proximity to either geothermal or hydrogen, or their ability to use district heat or electric heat pumps. I've got to stress that this model's pretty highly speculative, and different technology spread choices would show varying changes to the emissions reduction. But at a high level, it's possible to see that if we had a concerted push to move forward with these various decarbonisation options, and if that was made between now and 2038, then there is certainly the potential to move significantly towards those decarbonisation targets that we saw earlier on. So that concludes my slides, Clive.
Excellent, thank you very much, and thanks, Vanessa.
Clive, before we move on, I think I'm mindful there's a couple, I think there's a hand, Vanessa, I think you've had the same hand up twice now. Are we taking a quick question? You put it down now, so maybe that's all right.
Warning people on time.
Got it, okay, yeah. No worries.
Okay, Sally, would you like to introduce yourself?
Absolutely, thanks, Clive. I'm Sally Brewis. I'm Head of Regional Development for Cadent, and I cover the East Midlands, the East of England and North London, and my job is to develop our regional hydrogen programmes. So I'll just quickly, next slide please.
In the NHS. Just
Can everybody mute their microphones, especially if they're talking, please?
Super. So Cadent's patch then. So we supply around 12 million supply points across the UK. So we're based in the Northwest, West Midlands, and then you can see the rest on the map. And I cover the eastern side of that. We obviously transport natural gas. We can't continue to burn unabated natural gas. And in a nutshell, Cadent's ambition is to transition our networks to hydrogen. The first stage of that, we kind of see it in two parts. One is the industrial, commercial, power gen transport side of demand. And then the other part is residential demand for gas. I won't go into the residential, but what I will focus on today is on effectively industrial and commercial access to hydrogen, which we see happening through brand new or repurposed 100% hydrogen pipelines. Next slide, please. So government is supportive of stimulating a hydrogen economy within the UK, and they have been working on various publications, the hydrogen strategy, the heat and building strategy, the net zero strategy, all of which talk about hydrogen as a potential for residential, but as a requirement really in order to reach net zero for in particular heavy industry and commercial operations, but also definitely power generation and also on the transport side of things too. The two that I want to highlight on here are the transportation business models, which gas network operators like Cadent will need in order to understand how this new hydrogen world will come about and how the transport and the storage assets will be supported financially. But then on the production business model side of things, so that's again on the right hand side of the screen, this production business model will effectively subsidize hydrogen production just in the same way as wind energy has been subsidized for the past 14 years by government. Hydrogen needs help to bring the production price in line with natural gas, and that is government's ambition with this production business model. They want to make sure that the hydrogen cost to end users is on a par with natural gas, which I know will be an important consideration when you're thinking about how to decarbonise your sites. Next slide, please. So what this slide shows is a breakdown of our regions and the regional programmes that Cadent is involved in or leading on. So HyNet Northwest, some of you might have heard about, which is in the Northwest. It's a massive hydrogen pipeline programme. Just the first stage is 125 kilometres of brand new 100% hydrogen pipeline, and it will transport hydrogen produced in Ellesmere Port to industrial and power generation users across the Northwest. The initial connectees have been lined up for this pipeline, but any hospitals in this region who are interested in accessing hydrogen as part of their decarbonisation plans should get in touch with Cadent through Clive, and we'd really like to hear about your plans. It's called phase 3 effectively, which is the next level of considerations in terms of connections. So I've got more on the next steps later. Most of my presentation is about the East. So also on this slide, you've got East Coast Hydrogen, which I'm going to talk about. We've also got the Hydrogen Valley, which covers the West Midlands and that corridor across to north of Norfolk. And then Capital Hydrogen covers the southeast, the east of England and London. Just quickly on this slide, it's worth me mentioning the order of things. So HyNet is the most advanced, followed by East Coast Hydrogen, followed by Capital Hydrogen, the East London Hydrogen Pipeline, which I'll talk about. We do have some opportunities emerging in the Hydrogen Valley region in hotspot areas. So I guess if you can't see a pipeline in my slide deck, it doesn't necessarily mean that hydrogen isn't a possibility for your site. One example of this is the Bacton region, where we see large-scale hydrogen production coming online, and I know Norwich Hospital is in that vicinity. I'm showing you a snapshot in time today, and our programmes are developing every day. So if you're interested to talk to us, then please do get in touch. Next slide, please. So I've talked about HyNet already. East Coast Hydrogen covers the East Midlands network area, which also includes South Yorkshire. So very large-scale hydrogen production in the Humber region. And also we're seeing large-scale hydrogen production coming forward in Nottinghamshire as well, connected by pipelines. We're currently at pre-feed stage. And just to reassure any trust with hospitals in this area, we are aware of the potential need for hydrogen in your hospitals, and because we can access data on gas consumption, we have accounted for potential need for hospitals in this region for hydrogen within our pre-feed study, which is effectively the stage where we work out how the pipeline is routed, how the phases will be developed, so which bits will go first. And it's reaching a very exciting stage on East Coast Hydrogen. We hope to have the phasing done by the end of September. East Coast Hydrogen is primarily about a transmission pipeline at this stage, and we know that there will be some sites that can't connect up to that initial pipeline because of their location. Maybe they're embedded within city centres, but we also plan to have a parallel project, a distribution level project, in order to get access for harder to reach sites using distribution pipelines rather than the transmission pipeline that you can see on your screen for East Coast Hydrogen. Next slide, please. So I just wanted to give you a bit more confidence in these schemes and show how well supported they are. So East Coast Hydrogen, We have 67, well, it's probably more like 70 plus actually organisations now who support the programme, and that's across the value chain. So we've got hydrogen producers and supply chain organisations, that obviously the downstream users of hydrogen, and we're supported by local authorities too. So I just wanted to flag that these are well underway, these programmes, and I wanted to give you a sense of that from the level of support. And just two more slides, so if we can move on. This is the East London hydrogen pipeline proposed route. It goes from Thurrock into East London, and we're intending to connect to heat networks, heavy industry along the route. We haven't done much engagement with hospital sites in this region, so I wanted to flag that there is an opportunity there for those organisations too. And then just one more slide, please. So, as I've said, we would welcome direct dialogue with you on your trust decarbonisation. We can look to see which of our programmes might be most relevant for your sites, and also for those sites that are close to hydrogen production where we don't yet have hydrogen pipeline plans, such as the Bacton opportunity. We're really interested to talk to you, and it may be that your hospitals could help form the cornerstone of a new pipeline programme. And that's me. Thanks, Clive.
Apologies, while I just wind back. We changed the order of this at the last second, and I'm not competent enough to have done it any other way. Dr. Mullan.
Great. Thanks, Clive. And first of all, it's fantastic to see so many NHS trusts taking part and hearing about deep geothermal. I'm Dr. Kieran Mullan. I'm a Member of Parliament for Crewe and Nantwich, and I kind of champion the benefits of deep geothermal in Parliament. So I just wanted to come on today just really to encourage you all and just perhaps share some of the learning I've had from a review I did for the Prime Minister. So if I give you some background, I'm an MP, as I said, in Crewe and Nantwich, which is in Cheshire. And you would have seen on Corinna's maps that we're above a Cheshire basin, so we're potentially a really great location for deep geothermal. So I began exploring, why weren't we doing it, speaking in Parliament about it, speaking to ministers, and there didn't really seem to be a clear reason, perhaps just related to a lot of our oil and gas and our drilling expertise was focused on oil and gas, as opposed to in the continent where I think they diversified perhaps more quickly than we did. And to reassure you, because I think it's important for you to understand, there are hundreds of these plants across France, Germany, the Netherlands. It's a very well understood, very well used technology. And I was very lucky to be asked by the former Prime Minister to do a review, a snapshot review of this for the country and where we might take it. And that gave me the opportunity to visit a plant in Germany, and that's me there. The picture is me at a plant in a suburb of Munich, where they started out with one borehole and one functioning deep geothermal heat plant, and now they have, I think, 4 boreholes and plans for more. And I visited the town hall, swimming baths, businesses who are all using this technology very reliably. So whilst it's in some respects new to this country, it's not a new technology. It's very well proven and very well understood. The challenges I think that we have are that I think I want to talk to you about is about public engagement, community engagement, and why this is different, why your role is really important. When I did the review and published it and engaged with local media and local communities around this technology, there isn't an understanding of it. And I think if you're considering deep geothermal, I'd love to be able to help you engage with your local MPs, your local council, your local councillors, and so that actually part of your discussions take on board engaging the community. The common question that comes up, as you probably imagine, is when you're talking about drilling these days, there's just an immediate kind of public community question about drilling, and so you need to be prepared for that and think about how you're going to explain and define how deep geothermal is different to other types of drilling that people might have heard about and been concerned about. The things that I found very, very helpful was actually having visited a plant, and I'm not saying all of you got to go and head off to Europe to visit a plant, but the plant I visited was right next to a park, and the next thing along was a school, and they actually built a viewing platform for the children to see the drilling platform in operation, and they had a visitor centre there afterwards. And so it's about being able to explain that these are discrete, non-disruptive sources of heat and potentially energy. I know we're focused on heat today, and also that the other place that is piloting this stuff is the Eden project. So the Eden project is something that the public really do understand. They know those domes. I think most people have a sense that those domes and those biomes are a green, clean part of our country. And I visited the turn on of the heat plant that they've now built and is in operation, so that this winter those wonderful domes full of plants and from across the world are heated by this technology. And that also I found really helped reassure people that it was a technology that they can welcome and be really confident about, and that you can welcome and be confident about. And the learning talking to them was engaging with the community, talking to people early on. Another thing, I think, because again, Corinna gave an excellent technical presentation, but I actually talked about this about the Roman baths, because actually that's most people, they're familiar with the idea of hot springs and that hot water comes up from the ground in some places. And so you're just saying that we drill down to it on in some places too. If we go on to the next slide, please. Someone was actually asked an appropriate question around funding. So the challenge for these projects in comparison to other technologies is that relatively high upfront capital cost, that drilling is not cheap, and so it's persuading and making the business case for that drilling. One of the things that I did for the research I did was ask the industry to feedback what they found helpful, and these were things that they actually get in Europe. So they have things like a feed-in tariff. So if you deliver certain geothermal projects in some European countries, you get feed-in tariff from the government. There are also kind of capital grants available, which is what we've used so far. Have you been following the chat to advance planning for some geothermal projects for hospitals in this country, and also some insurance and things like that. But it is a challenge, and I think it's just about working with the help that you've had from people, from Corinna and other people and CEF, to really evidence the potential, understand the potential, so that you minimize the risk, and to persuade people that it's a worthy investment. But what I'm going to try and do is actually persuade at a government level and across the NHS about how we can perhaps look at some of these funding mechanisms, because grant funding is really great, but actually for these types of industries, kind of a shared risk approach is probably more effective, and that you can do through feed-in tariffs and insurance. The next slide, please. The other thing to touch on, which again Corinna mentioned, is the coal mine heat. So if you're a hospital in a community that's got historic coal mines, it's mentioned in the same vein, but that's kind of a very different challenge. So the challenge for deep geothermal is that upfront cost of drilling and having to secure that money. The challenge for mine water heat is actually just understanding that resource at a local level. And so there's lower hanging fruit there in some areas, and the coal authority are the people who control all the old mine workings, so they're responsible for all of this. And I worked with the coal authority. They're very happy to find partners. They're not funded to do this work, but if a partner wants to do their work in a particular area, they will work with you to try and understand what the opportunities are for you locally. Where you have to think about what the old coal mine workings haven't been touched for 50 years or more in some places, and they kind of move and the maps are not up to date, and you don't quite understand how the water flows, and so you need help to understand that. But if you do understand it, it's actually quite an accessible resource. It doesn't have that same high cost as deep geothermal. And I think the last thing I want to say is actually you would help us. We're all advocates of deep geothermal. Hospitals are a really ideal candidate for this technology, and if we can get the technology furthered in this country and have more examples of it with all of you, it will help the whole cause of deep geothermal to move forward, because you're really ideal candidates for it. Because the challenge of building a heat network and finding lots of customers is another challenge, whilst with a single customer on its own could justify a deep geothermal plant all on your own. And so that's what we're doing in my area, my local hospital. We're seeking to have a plant to operate them, and as you've seen on the chat, there are a number of hospitals that are pursuing it. So you'd be joining an already existing group, you'd be using an already proven technology, and you'd be looking into an area of renewable that the government is increasingly interested in because of its potential, and that we need to kind of all work together to push that. So I just really all encourage you, and just reiterate, if you're interested in doing it and you want some help and some advice and discussion about engaging local political structures, I'm very happy to help you to do that, and talking to individuals that you know, MPs that I might know, and approaching councils, and also just help you think through how you come up with a comms strategy and an engagement strategy around it. So yeah, that was what I really wanted to contribute.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm just paging back to find where we're at. If you just give me a second to do that. I'm afraid we've run slightly out of time, but I'm going to carry on in the hope that you'll bear with us. Of course, you've now heard a lot about the technologies. I wanted to just talk about the doing. So I'm Clive Nattrass, been the chief exec of the Carbon Energy Fund for a long time. The trustees are concerned that we're not getting to net zero fast enough, and they've seconded me to work with the parties you all speak today to try and actually see whether we can get the NHS to net zero as per the plan. So it's all about collaboration. It's about sharing information, which is helpful, but also it reduces the risk. We have power together. It allows us to do trials. It allows us to get good finance. It allows us to share resources, and we can do things that no one trust can do alone. And it would be that from buying power or persuading companies to come to us and help us and amend their services for us. And also leverage advice to our boards, because we're all busy. We all have a day job. Net zero is a serious thing, and it gets delegated down the organization. At some point, we need to be talking to the board, and we could just do with some help. And that's what everybody on this call is committed to, is to trying to give you some help. And my job is purely delivery in this respect. But when all's boiled down, there are two potential projects that could come out for you. One is something on your site, and that could be dealing with old plant or plant that's the wrong temperature or wrong pressure or something else, and could be doing with energy reduction measures and the like on site. And then there is the potential for a project off site. Now, district heating might be under your feet, but I'm treating it as off site. I'm treating district heating systems as off site, importing solar power from another source as being off site. So you potentially need two projects to be going on, and all within the context of what your actual site conditions are. And the collaboration, the idea of collaboration is that we can all help with these little areas are. So we can help you with prepare for governance and business cases, your net zero plans, at the appropriate time, and if required, procurements for people you need to work with. And so far, we've already kicked off the first round of the geothermal. So we've got 5 hospitals in geothermal procurement at the moment under a shared model that we're doing without fees. We haven't quite worked out how we're going to get done, but it's been subsidized and we've got there. We can deal with finance and funding to the extent that we need it. Drilling wells are expensive. We can deal with risks, both risks of government decisions, because obviously the government are trying to manage a moving target of our country, and we can influence the decisions they make. There's the geological work and feeding stuff through to Sally or to Corinna or anybody else to get updated information. For some of the technology, we're trying to arrange trials and the like, share data, and try and help with contractor performance. Top right, I've kind of put what this little committee can do. We bring influence. We can bring influence to bear on the parties in question, and I think everybody's offered to try and do that. And then when it comes to the doing end of things, we can help trusts manage resources, contractors and suppliers with the actual projects you try and do. And this is more my area of expertise. So you've seen this several times. We're trying to attack gas. We're looking at electricity. You can replace gas. That's one way of doing it. And that tends to, in this context, be about off-site measures, solar power and flow battery technology, which we're all exploring under this collaboration, whilst the national network looks to clean up. We're obviously looking to reduce our footprint through substitution from gas and transformation of how we actually use heat. The top right is consumption and condition, and this is what, to some degree, you guys need to bring if you choose to come to the IM workshops, because we want you to leave the IM workshop knowing which technologies you'd particularly like to follow as part of your planning, and with an idea of the timescales and work that's involved in that. But the person who knows the condition of your own site and whether you need to de-steam or whether you've got old boilers or what the condition of your site is, what development's going on, is yours, and you need to bring that to the workshops so that when we try and help you, show you how we put stuff together, we can put it in context, and I'll touch upon that in a second. And then, of course, the real goal, if we can get it, is carbon-free energy, be that geothermal, hydrogen, clean heat networks, because there are lots of district heating networks that aren't clean, using excess land if that's possible, one way or the other. And then there is also, in a new world, where you imagine you've got heat pumps and you've got electricity and you may still have a bit of gas and you may have some hydrogen, you may have geothermal, who knows what your mix is. There may be a need to manage energy services to wheel between the different energy sources. So we are giving thought to whether trusts need, the NHS needs its own managed service to manage the energy flow into hospitals, for hospitals, because it's going to get more complex. Okay, each technology has its own process. I won't talk you through this one, other than this is the flow line for geothermal procurement that's out at the moment. So the context of what technology you're interested in affects a lot about how we plan, how things might go. You know, as a person who delivers schemes, I can only see us working in tranches. We can't do 209 trusts starting this week, next year, because you have different needs on your site. You've got governance requirements, and things like geothermal take 4 years. So there's 2 years of feasibility and permits, and then 2 years of doing a well and then completing it. So if you imagine we're going to put all 112 trusts through who Corinna spoke about through looking at geothermal, we can't do you all at once. And if you do hydrogen, if you're lucky enough to get hydrogen coming to you, then we still have to do a procurement, because somebody's going to have to do some piping and some mods, and possibly mods on your site as well. And then there's going to be an installation, and that's got to be ready in time for what you're doing. So, and we are subject to some external timescales. So I've put a nominal line here, 2026/7, to kind of just indicate that some of the hydrogen production is subject to decisions that have yet to be made or works that are ongoing at the moment, and therefore a bit fluid. So we obviously can't kick off any serious spend in hydrogen until we're pretty clear that we're not going to waste any money, because there's no point spending millions to convert to hydrogen and then realizing you're not going to get it within the timescales and then changing horses. So as a deliverer, those kind of things are extremely important. As regards this program of support that you've been kind enough to attend today, we're doing the kickoff. It'll be repeated later in the month, so people who haven't made it can attend it. I apologize for jumping backwards and forwards of slides, but it has been filmed and it's available for people to have a look at it. It will go up on the collaboration website. We're then following it with 2 months of technology meetings, 5 groups of technology meetings, so that you can come to the ones that interest you to learn more about what you've seen today. And see what you want to pursue. Then at IHEAM, we're actually going to meet face to face at IHEAM in Manchester. You don't have to pay to come in to see our bit. You can join the workshops, and you can attend the workshops that you think are appropriate to your technology and your needs. But you do have to bring with you a fairly clear view of your own site and what its needs are, because you have to make an assessment of what needs to happen before you can do something else. Then we will help you with how long each technology takes and what the timescales are looking like, and you'll have updates in all kinds of ways on that. And then between us, we'll come up with a plan. And then you'll see the following arrows are slightly lighter in blue, because these things depend upon your feedback. If you're engaged and you're helping us and this is valuable to you, then we will do follow-ups after the workshop and help you make plans and do your reports if you want that. And then I put a even lighter one saying we will assist you with the process if that's what you want. But it's up to you to find this useful by telling us what we need to do better and what you'd like more of. And then we will try and help you to the extent that we can do that. Okay, talk about IHEAM. Are you in a position to speak, Lorna? Have I messed your thing up?
No, I don't know.
Hello. Hi, so I'm Lorna Jones, the commercial lead within the Carbon Energy Fund, and I am supporting the team in these engagement meetings and supporting the trust and teams to move forward into the technology focus. So what we just wanted to end this presentation with is just to alert you all to what is going on and when it is all going on. So as you're part of this one today, there's another one the 26th of July, which are these engagement kick-off calls, just to start getting the brain matter going with the tech and get you thinking about your own sites. We then move on to more technology focused meetings, and as you're seeing from some of the speakers, and the maps, depending on where you are, really depends on the technology that would really be more relevant to you. So we do work through the Northwest hydrogen opportunity, the geothermal opportunities, the district heating and off-site options, East Coast hydrogen, and the decarbonisation of gas and on-site options. So we're doing initial technology talks in August, and then these are repeated again in September. This will then be followed, as Clive said in his previous slide, to hopefully everyone seeing face-to-face at the IHEAM workshops and everyone having a much greater understanding as to what they really need to be getting out of this, and to have the right conversations with the right people. November sessions, as Clive said, it depends on how this evolves, how you want this to look. So then we'll just start building on that following, hopefully, the momentum from IHEAM. If you could go on to the next slide, Clive. Thank you. So the objectives by the end of IHEAM is really for the trust to have that kind of focus in mind to support in the submission of the heat decarbonisation plans at the end of the financial year. This is a collaboration for the trust to work together to identify their technology. So just really kind of use that time and space to talk to each other, learn from each other, and hopefully we can, as a team, start to really make great progress with hitting these targets. We are hoping that you all will leave IHEAM with an understanding of that route to net zero and what that programme could really look like for your sites. And then, as we said, following the IHEAM workshops, we'll offer further focus groups working potentially in tranches. And the shape of that will really depend on all of you and how you want that to work successfully for everyone. And that's it from me, and it's great to meet you all. Thank you.
Thank you to whoever muted me. Thank you for that. Shows you the old dog teaching an old dog new tricks. So thank you all for coming. I do really hope this has been useful to you and that you'll follow the following things and get some benefit from them. And if you aren't, just tell us and we'll make them better. Mary, do you want to say farewell on behalf of us all?
No, absolutely. Thank you everyone for joining. I think we've well overrun. So I just wanted to answer a quick question by Josh in the chat. So to attend the workshops, we do have some level of granular mapping of trusts that we think are suited to some technologies, and we'll send dedicated invites to that. But more generally as well, you can attend any of these workshops just to learn a bit more. So yeah, I think hopefully that answers your question. See you guys at the next one.
You're quite right, Mary. Everybody will get an invite to everything, but I will attempt to say to you, I think you should attend if you're on the Geological. So I'm going to try and give you a hint in the invites, but it's proved to be a little harder to do than I first thought, but I'll do my best.
Yeah. Great. Thank you, everybody. See you at the next one.
Yes, no, thank you all very much. And feel free, if you've heard it once and you don't need to hear it again, we don't need to see you next time, but send anybody who needs to come. Speak to you all soon.